First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Citadel of Love here on Barber Street in the northeast section of our community. I am Brandon McGee, State Representative for the 5th Assembly District, and I am also a member and deacon of this church, and so I'm really glad that each of you could be here. One, to just come together in this beautiful weather, but I think more importantly to hear what's happening in the great state of Connecticut with respect to second chance legislation. So at this time, I'd like to introduce the pastor, the leader, and my dad of this church here, Dr. Marshall Muntz.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Senator McGee, State Representative McGee. So I'm really happy that you guys are here this morning. It is really exciting to hear about this Second Chance initiative and to see how things are happening in our state, especially this neighborhood where we work. It is rare that I can even come into my office without someone asking me for a couple dollars. That's just the nature of the beast in this neighborhood. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to the suburbs. I'm staying right here, working with these people. I grew up on Barber Street, right down the street, and I've lived in this neighborhood about 30 years now. So my heart is here, and I'm really excited. Most of the people who I counsel and minister to are people who have cases and who are trying to figure out how to get this money together. So with what the governor is doing, I'm really, really excited because I think people are going to get a better opportunity to have a better life, and that's ultimately what we're after. I'm excited as a pastor of this great church to introduce to you the governor of the great state of Connecticut, Governor Daniel Malloy.
Thank you very much. Overseer, thank you very much for allowing us to be here. This is an important location in Hartford, as the mayor well knows. It is a troubled neighborhood in some senses, but a neighborhood that's also filled with very good people and people who want to help turn their neighborhood around and this block around and this city around. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to be with you. I want to thank the mayor for joining us as well. He and I used to work together. Now we work together again. And I want to thank the two chairs of the Judiciary Committee, the senator and the representative, for being with us as well. Last year, we came together to pass broad reforms to our criminal justice system to recreate a second chance society in Connecticut. Our reforms were nationally recognized because we changed the way Connecticut approaches criminal justice. We changed simple drug possessions from a felony to a misdemeanor and eliminated the mandatory minimum sentences that had devastated urban communities like Hartford. We created an expedited process for pardons and parole so that those who are eligible can get on with their lives and return to their communities. And we provided funding for a pilot program right here in Hartford to get job training and adult education to ex-offenders and put them back to work as quickly as possible. But as the world keeps evolving, so must we. We must continue to be a society of permanent reformation and improvement instead of permanent punishment. So I want to lay out a Second Chance 2.0, new priorities that will make Connecticut safer. First, it's time for us to take a different approach to adolescents, age 18 to 20, or young people in Connecticut. We have seen that so many of the young people caught in Connecticut's juvenile justice system and young adults who have already entered our adult system have been exposed to physical, emotional, and sexual trauma. And we know that far too many offenders in our adult system were once part of our juvenile system. The system must change. That's why I'm announcing today that we want to add those young adults not convicted of serious crimes aged 18 to 20 into our juvenile justice system. If we are to truly be about corrections, and if we're going to truly work toward ensuring that those housed in our prisons never return, then we need to avoid a one-size-fits-all approach. Our prisons should not be crime schools for our youngest, most impressionable offenders. We've raised the age before, and the results have been overwhelming success. Between 2008 and 2014, the number of 15 to 19-year-olds arrested in Connecticut dropped 54%. Arrests amongst 17-year-olds fell from approximately 6,600 in 2008 to 2,600 in 2014, a 60% reduction in 6 years. The number of inmates in Connecticut under 18 has dropped from 332 in 2009 to 82 in 2015. Between January 1st, 2009 and January 1st, 2016, the number of prisoners aged 18 to 21 fell from 2,000 to 964, a 54% decline. We know what works. Let's implement it. Second, I'm proposing that we extend the existing youthful offender statute, which currently applies to 16 and 17-year-olds, to 18, 19, and 20-year-olds beginning in October. Here's what that would do. It would prevent public stigma and lifelong punishment for those young adults. It would allow young adults to eventually have their records expunged so that they can go to college, get a job, and attain housing. It would ensure that low-risk youth adults are not incarcerated for longer than 4 years and that their records are automatically erased providing they don't reoffend roughly for 4 years after the offense as a youth. If we want to tackle the cycle of crime and poverty, and we want to change the way we approach criminal justice with long-term approaches, then we need to think about our approach to this age group today. Finally, I want to talk about bail. We know that too many Connecticut residents are sitting in jail, basically pre-trial, because they can't come up with somewhere between $250 to $2,000. That number, these are individuals who are often drug addicted, mentally ill, or just plain poor, who have been charged with minor, often misdemeanor charges. If a judge had identified them as risky, their bond would have been far higher. So this is about 550 people today in our jail system on bail under $20,000. Most people can make bail on $20,000 with somewhere between $250 to $2,000. I want people to understand that. We know that this population is disproportionately non-white, and we know that low-risk defendants detained or held for 8 to 14 days are much more likely to be rearrested before trial. You might ask why, and so let me explain it. 18 to 14 days is a period of incarceration pre-trial that has been studied. In that 18 to 14 day period, you lose your job. You may lose your housing. You may lose contact with your support network or your family. We know that when you're away from those things for as short a period of time as 8 days, it increases the likelihood of additional involvement in the criminal justice system well beyond anything that we can otherwise reasonably explain as a factor. These are low-risk individuals. It's important to understand that. We know that this population, again, is non-white, and that we know that risk defendants held for 8 to 14 days are 56% more likely to be rearrested before trial, and 51% more likely to after punishment, commit other crimes. In short, what we know is that those who are held in jail longer for low-risk offenses are more likely to commit an additional offense. It must change. So today I'm proposing that we eliminate bail for anyone charged only with a misdemeanor, those low-risk, nonviolent offenses. Exceptions, of course, would be made in the event that a judge determined the accused to pose an immediate threat to another person should they be released. And basically that simply has to be a finding by the judge. I'm also proposing a further change to the bond system to allow every criminal and misdemeanor defendant to make a cash deposit of 10% of their bail set by a judge in order to be released while awaiting trial. This option would allow defendants alternatives to bail bondsmen who charge a fee, sometimes of 7% of the total bail amount, sometimes even higher, but do not return those funds to the defendant. In our scenario, if a defendant shows up for each of his or her court dates, they would get their 10% back. If they don't, then the money is surrendered and goes to support legal services. In contrast, the 7% fee that defendants pay to a bail bondsman never comes back. Bail is meant to ensure that the accused appears in court, not to extend our historically flawed system of permanent punishment. Defendant dollars can go to better use, quite frankly. We're talking about misdemeanors, not violent crimes. We don't need to be footing a bill of $120 a night for these low-risk offenders, and we shouldn't be exposing them to a correctional system that has proven to increase criminal behavior, not decrease it. Finally, here's what we know. Crime is down to an almost half-century low, dropping faster here than in almost any other state. Recidivism is also down. Our prison population is down, and it's time to change our approach. The world is changing, and our criminal justice laws need to change with it. That's why I'm here with you today to unveil these important legislative proposals, and that's why I'll appear a little bit later today with a group that I'm otherwise charging to help us implement and come up with additional rules and regulations on how to implement the system, the JPOC folks. With that, I'd like to, I know you're here, but I'm going to go to Eric, and this is his city, his area, and I know that you might have a few things you wanted to say, Eric.
I was born here.
You were born here, that's right. Oh, man.
I would like to add some things. First, I'd like to thank Pastor Montz for hosting this press conference. And secondly, I'd like to say how enthused I am concerning the strides that the state has been making in the area of criminal justice under the leadership of Governor Malloy and also Mayor Bronin, especially in his capacity as formerly counsel to the governor. I am very appreciative and gratified by the fact that people are beginning to listen to some things that I and other colleagues such as Mike Lawler and others have been saying for years, and that is that there is a correlation between recidivism and criminal conduct and the lack of opportunity that manifests itself in the form of the stigmatization and the barriers and impediments that occur as a result of incarceration and criminal conviction. There are 2 points that I want to make about what the governor has talked about today, and that is, number one, we should treat violence and those who threaten or pose a threat to public safety very seriously. But the second point I want to make is that our criminal justice system, our system of justice in general, should be a fair system. And I think what is being proposed, what has been proposed last year and what is being proposed today and for the upcoming session is consistent with making our criminal justice system much more fair and continues the effort to eliminate the stigma and the impediments and the barriers to people participating fully and productively in our society. So I want to thank the governor for his leadership and everyone else involved in these initiatives, and I look forward to being supportive and in fact championing these initiatives in the upcoming session. Thank you so much.
Keeping with the theme of local, I'll let Luke, if he has any remarks to make, and then I'll take some questions.
Thank you very much, Governor. Thank you for holding this event here in Hartford. I also want to thank Pastor Montz for welcoming us here. And also just to recognize briefly, we have Mohammed Ansari, who is the president of our local Greater Hartford chapter of the NAACP, who has been a leader in this fight in the last round of Second Chance Society reforms, as well as this current round. And we also have the president of our statewide Baptist Convention and State Representative Brandon McGee, in addition to our co-chairs of the Judiciary Committee. Lastly, I want to recognize my partner, City Council President T.J. Clark. This is a critical issue nationwide, statewide, but especially here in the city of Hartford. There are thousands of residents in our city who have been permanently cut off from economic opportunity because of mistakes in their past, and not because they pose a current threat to public safety, not because they are currently interested in continuing a life of crime, but because of the mistake they made in the past, they can't get over that hurdle. For Connecticut, under the governor's leadership, to be at the forefront nationally of this reform movement is something we need to all recognize, take pride in, and fight for. We're doing it at a time when, for the first time in years, there's an alignment. In Washington, President Obama's administration is, again, recognizing how important this issue is and is fighting for change. At the statewide level, Governor Malloy is fighting for change. There are things we can do locally as well. One of the first things that I did after taking office was identify a position focused on reentry services. That's just a small step, but it reflects the fact that as we talk about creating jobs, creating economic opportunity, we cannot leave aside what needs to be done to connect those who have made past mistakes to economic opportunity. And the last thing I'll say is a hugely important part of this effort is going to the private sector and making sure that they join us in this effort to remove obstacles. The governor held a press conference just before the holidays at Bear's Barbecue, which is a local Hartford institution that made the decision to not care about a criminal record so long as somebody was looking to work, was willing to work hard, and was dedicated. And what they found, like so many other employers, is that if you give somebody a second chance, it pays off, because they know how hard it was to get that chance, and they will be your most loyal, dedicated employee for years to come. So I just want to, again, commend the governor for his national leadership on this issue, thank him for holding this press conference here on Barber Street, and thank everybody who is here and has been and will continue to be such a strong partner in this effort.
And then finally, this is not the first time I've been on Barber Street, and happy to be back to make this announcement. We were here in the heat of the summer and the heat of the spring, and we're back. So with that, I'm happy to take some questions.
Governor? Is this the first step in a wider effort to reform bail? For Connecticut to adopt what the federal system does, basically have preventative detention that will allow a judge to assess risk, and if there's no risk, you can let the person out without bail, and conversely lock up without bail. Are you going to pursue that, and would that require a constitutional amendment?
There are additional steps that could be taken if there was a constitutional amendment. We certainly intend to take the steps that we can legislatively and proactively. And yes, these things are connected.
Are you exploring seeking a constitutional amendment, which obviously would be more involved?
Well, you know, I think, Paz, to answer it truthfully, this is kind of, you know, let's a step at a time. And I am most concentrated and have studied the numbers. You know, the idea that 550 to 600 people are incarcerated at any given time on less than $20,000 bail. And that sounds like a lot of money to folks, but I want, you know, if you write this story, you got to tell the whole story. People make $20,000 bail with as little as $250 and generally not more than $2,000. So in essence, we have 550 people who are in jail for lack of $2,000. And that can be up in summer months as high as $650. We're paying $120 a night. If they're not a risk, they shouldn't be there. If they are a risk, then I have no problems with that. But make a finding that that they need to stay in jail on a misdemeanor or a minor crime because they're a risk, not because we simply set the bail expecting that we simply set the bail at something between $1 and $20,000, expecting that somebody would have somewhere between $250 and $2,000.
Not all those people, though, are being held on misdemeanors. What's the breakdown?
Yeah, I don't know, maybe Mr. Lawler. I don't have that number in my top of my head. We are saying that misdemeanors in particular, unless there's a risk, should not require.
Governor, will you be proposing anything else in addition to the proposals you've outlined today as part of your Second Chance Society 2.0?
Well, I mean, I think that in summer, I mean, obviously we're not distributing the legislation at this time. You'll get that on Tuesday or Wednesday, I think. But what I've done is largely summarize everything we're doing. There are probably details involved in the language, which I don't want to pretend that I've covered everything, but basically this is it.
Are you contemplating doing anything in terms of aimed at rehabilitating or further rehabilitating violent offenders?
Sure, we are doing that. I think we're coordinating our activity with not-for-profits as well as our corrections system to do just that. Some of the innovations that we've brought about just in the last year with a section in a jail devoted to people who can recall their best days as being in the service, Navy, Army, Marines, and other, is a step in the right direction. A preparatory part of a jail that is specifically designed preparatory to release is part of those efforts. Those are efforts on top of everything else we've done, which is actually bringing the recidivism rate down already in the state of Connecticut, and of course we're going to continue that.
Governor, there was a lot of there was widespread support for a lot of the 1.0. And no real formal opposition to it, but that was also for mandatory minimums. Isn't it a different conversation and a selling point when there are people who you want them to be allowed back on the streets after they've already done something that they shouldn't have?
Those are not different treatments, with all due respect. I mean, you measure outcomes, right? We know the science is developed that the human mind is not reached its full point of maturation until about age 25. And I have statutory evidence of that. We don't allow people to buy cigarettes till they're 18, and people are making proposals that we move it to 21. We don't allow anyone under the age of 21 to buy liquor. We've already made the determination that certain age groups should receive different treatment. What I'm saying is, well, let's extend that to youthful offenders or young offenders in the hopes that that's the springboard to avoiding a life of crime or a life where you can't get housing, you can't get a job, and you can't get a student loan. And I'm just trying to marry those two things because we know that if you go to jail, even in an environment where recidivism is down, still in the state of Connecticut, if you end up incarcerated, you're far more likely to be reincarcerated. And so doing those things that we can do to prevent that from happening, but making sure that people are being treated in such a way as to discourage a future behavior makes a lot of sense. That's all we're saying. And then I know I got to get back. So,
Governor, are you concerned about the risk you're taking in I guess, lowering some of the thresholds here? That there is going to be that one person who gets out and commits that violent crime, and it's going to come back and.
No one gets out who wouldn't otherwise get out. And I just want to go back to this. Just remember that violent criminals are doing more time under my administration than they did under Jody Rell's administration, than they did under John Rowland's administration, than they did under Governor O'Neill's administration. That's the reality. That's where we are. No one gets out who wouldn't otherwise get out. And violent offenders are doing more time. And I know we could debate whether that's fair or not fair, but that's a decision that the community has made. What I'm trying to do, because I can give you the statistics that show that this will make us safer, is avoid people from becoming permanent criminals because of how they are treated basically on minor offenses. That's what I'm trying to do. And the proof that that works were all of those numbers that I gave you at the very beginning. Go back to 2006 when the debate about raising the age was being had in the state of Connecticut. All those arguments, we'd be more dangerous, there'd be more crimes, there'd be more repeat offenders. Every one of those arguments has been refuted. And I have personal knowledge about this. The amount of pressure that I was under to delay or do away with raising the age when I became governor was that first year. You weren't around. You were down in Washington and away in elsewhere. Was pretty tough. A lot of small town police departments and mayors and first selectmen said, "Oh, you're going to cost us too much money. We can't build separate facilities. We can't do all of this other stuff." We implemented. And as a result, we are rapidly lowering the number of people who are incarcerated. Here's a statistic which we need to scrub it a little bit more, but in general terms, I asked our corrections folks, what is the percentage of people incarcerated in Connecticut who were incarcerated before the age of 25 for the first time? And I think I have this right, it was approximately 75%. That audience of people incarcerated in Connecticut is already down 50 to 60%. It predicts well for even lower crime in the future if we stay the course, because repeat offenders are just that. And those who are not repeat offenders should be recognized for that, and we shouldn't be giving advanced degrees in prison. And what I'm talking about is advanced degrees in criminology or criminal behavior. Getting your GED and high school diploma and college credits, that's A-okay, but not advanced degrees in criminal behavior. So I've got to run.
Can you just address something that the bail bond industry is certain to bring up, which they're going to say, look, when these folks don't show up, we go find them. So would you address that?
Sure. The numbers of people who don't appear on bail of under $20,000 are extremely low. I mean, I think that's the honest conclusion. And that is in comparison to what we know as little as 8 days of incarceration will do. The damage we do incarcerating someone from 18 to 14 days on a national basis far outstrips the other. That's just the reality. I'm sounding preachy, but I believe this stuff. I think we can make ourselves. That's right. Can I get a name, Matt? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Steve.